Okay, everybody, welcome back to class. Hopefully you guys are having a good day. Good to see you guys. Let me just make sure that I send one final announcement out to anybody who might not have noticed the earlier stuff, but to anybody arriving now, just getting into the meeting, thank you guys for being here. I really do appreciate it. We still got a few minutes until class time. It's at 4 o'clock. So I'm just waiting for some of the numbers to come up, and then right at 4, we'll just jump into our lecture. Hope you guys are having a good first week of class and managing the whole online learning as well as you guys can. We're just going to have our intro lecture today to the first, content-based lecture on critical thinking and the stuff that we've got for our class. So we're getting off on the right foot, but there's still a few more minutes until it's 4 o'clock. Cool. I'm just going to switch to another window to make sure I've given everyone the notice that they need. Okay. Just hello there. Hi, Gabby. Hope you're doing well. About another minute, and then I'll go right into the lecture. I don't want to start early. Give everybody the most time they can get to arrive to the live stream. My cat. 2 cats. I don't know where they're at, but they'll probably make a little appearance if we give them enough time. So, yeah, they're in the next room, just hanging out. Yeah. Hello. How's it going? Good to see you guys. About another couple seconds, and then I'm going to start getting into our lecture. Okay, guys, it's 4 o'clock, so welcome to class. Good to see you guys here. Yeah, I do have a cat. I have 2 kittens that I just got during the summer. I had a cat before that for 16 years, and sadly she passed away just randomly in April. So, after a few months, decided to start over with some new kittens, and yeah, they're really cute. You'll definitely see them eventually. But hello to everybody here in the meeting. Welcome back to Critical Thinking. Anybody who wants to, feel free to just jump in the live chat there and say hello. So we're going to do a lot of our lectures this semester through YouTube Live, the same format that we're using right now. Sometimes I will go back to Zoom, so we're going to kind of use both platforms, but I'm going to use this one a lot because I think it streamlines things a bit. Sometimes everyone's microphone and camera can actually, I think, serve as a distraction at certain points. So I've just used this and I thought it worked pretty well in the spring. But we're going to use both to get the most out of both systems. So good to see everybody there. I see all you guys saying hello. Really glad that we're all here today on our first lecture. Any questions that anyone might have? If they do, I see your comments in the live chat. The live chat is going to be archived just like the lecture itself. It's all recorded and then uploaded to the channel. So anybody's comments and stuff, they're going to be up there. Make sure that you be respectful and polite in the comments, like I'm sure you will be. And we should have a really good, productive meeting. All right, you asked about the cat, right? Well, here's one of them. Princess Peach. Peachy. She's like putty in my hands. She's just the sweetest cat. But anyway, there you guys go. I told you, you'll probably see her at some point. All right, so guys, let's go right into our stuff here. So this is a class that's all about critical thinking, critical reasoning and writing. So what I want to start with is just telling you guys a little bit about the basic concept of what it even is to be a good critical thinker. What it is to be a good critical thinker, and then we're going to talk about what it is for a person to be like not so good a critical thinker or a bad critical thinker. That'll be our stage setting discussion for everything that follows. But let me just put some of that up here on this whiteboard. So the whiteboard that you see displayed here, sometimes I'm going to write notes up on it in the old school classroom style. I'm just using a marker and putting the notes like you see. You guys at home or wherever you are taking your notes, you should just take them the same way you would in a classroom setting, but you also have the additional, I guess, benefit of being able to re-watch and replay the lecture later to make sure your notes are totally clear and set. Sometimes I'll also use the chat to type in some type notes, like sometimes maybe the writing may become scrunched or less legible. If that's the case, I'll double back up by putting something in the chat, okay? All right, so we're all trying now to learn how to be good critical thinkers. What is a good critical thinker? Okay. Okay. And if the cats get in the chat or anything like blocking some of the view, I'll make sure to put them in the next room and you'll get the notes. Don't worry if they block or somewhat obscure some of the board for a moment. It won't be, but for a moment. Okay. So what's a good critical thinker? And the last thing I want to do, you guys saw Princess Peach, right? Okay. That's the girl. This is her brother, Eddie. Big Eddie. He's a good boy. He's like a shy boy, but he's like so sweet. Okay. Eddie. Get to know him. Good kitty. All right, Eddie. We're gonna go down now. Okay. Here you go. A good critical thinker. Okay. So this is a person that will not believe a claim unless it is based on a good argument or good evidence. These cats are out of control. Okay, guys, I told you it might have to happen. As the semester goes on, I think they'll calm down a little bit. They're getting used to this whole online thing too. So I'm going to put them in the next room, unfortunately. Say hi, guys. Yeah, you know it. Okay, sorry, I'll be right back. Sorry. All right. Yeah, I hate to do it, but you'll see him again. He'll be back. I'll let him back in after a little while. Okay, so anyways, back to this. A good critical thinker is a person that will not believe a claim unless it is based on a good argument or good evidence. So I'm going to put argument / evidence. Either way, that's what the good critical thinker needs before they're going to be willing to say, okay, I believe that. That sounds like it's true. And then there's another part. So there's two big components to this concept. First of all, the good critical thinker won't believe claims unless they're based on good arguments or evidence. And likewise, when they make claims to other people, to others, right? So when they're one, not hearing the claim, but actually presenting the claim to someone else, they provide a good argument or evidence to back up their claim. Okay, so you see it there. That's the definition that we're just starting this class with, what it is to be a good critical thinker. So it's just as you see it written. A good critical thinker is the type of person that they're not just going to believe something that they hear, that they read, that says to them, unless there's some type of good argument, some good persuasive argument or evidence, some reasons that sound persuasive to make them justify that belief. You know, so the good critical discerning about what they believe. They are looking for reasons and explanations. They don't just take things at face value. So the first instinct of a critical thinker when they hear some claim is not just to say, wow, I didn't know that, that's crazy and I can't believe that's true, or that, you know, they just accept it at face value. Instead, the basic reaction is something like, are you sure? How do you know that? Tell me more. What is the proof? Is that something that can be demonstrated through argument or by evidence? So the critical thinkers of the world are not just loose and casual about the things they believe. They have higher intellectual standards than that. So they're a little bit pickier about the things that they allow to pass into their belief system. You could think of it as the critical thinker is scrutinizing about incoming information. They're willing to believe things, sure, but only when it's worthy of their belief, only when there's some type of solid argument, good reasons that can justify those claims that they're hearing. Otherwise, they're going to remain skeptical and say, I'm not so sure. It hasn't really been proven, I don't think. I haven't heard a good argument for it. So the jury is out, and I can't say that I agree. So they don't let beliefs pass through this like filter of criticism and critical thought unless it's attached to a really good argument. And at the same time, the second part here is when they're making claims to other people. So we're human beings and we deal with information, right? Sometimes you're the one receiving information. It could be from your professors, it could be from the media, it could be from your parents or various leaders within your own community. When you hear information that's given to you, you have a choice. Do I believe it? Do I not believe it? And why? A good critical thinker is going to be judicious and mindful of the fact that sometimes we can get things wrong, and they just insist on evidence and argument. So, of course, if they expect to get a good argument or reasons before they're gonna believe something that's put to them, then when they are in the other role of making claims to other people, they are going to do their part and provide good arguments or evidence to back their own claims up. So a good critical thinker doesn't just come out and say, here's something that's true, but I don't know why, that's just what I think. I can't tell you how I came to that conclusion or why I believe it, it's just the way I feel or just the way I think. They have arguments, they have reasons that they could give. If somebody asks, how do you know, or why do you think that's true? The critical thinker will say, well, good question, I'll tell you, because there are some reasons, and I'll give you these reasons to support my belief. So a good critical thinker can back their statements up with facts and evidence. If you're a bad critical thinker, though, and that's what we're going to talk about next, then you lack both of these abilities. The ability to judge information and see whether it's worthy of your belief or not. So a bad critical thinker just believes things regardless of whether or not they're based on good arguments. If something sounds good to them, they'll just go ahead and believe it with no further question. So that's the kind of characteristic that we're trying to get better at and move beyond. And a bad critical thinker also, at the same time, when they make claims to people, they lack the ability to really justify those claims. They have no capacity to base that claim on a good argument that could persuade a rational, inquiring mind. So with the limitations of board space that we have, frequently, have to clear the board and put the next note. So this note and some discussion we've seen, I'm going to erase, just put up the term bad critical thinker. We'll talk about that definition, and then we'll have a little discussion in the chat about what you guys think could be some, fair examples of both types of individual. Okay, so good critical thinker. Okay, so of course, two sides to this. There's also the bad critical thinker. And as you might imagine, this term is just defined in contrary to the previous one. Okay? So, bad critical thinker. This is a person that will believe claims that are not based on good argument or evidence. And when making claims to others, they do not provide, they do not provide good arguments or evidence to support their claim. Okay, so good critical thinkers out there, they make good arguments to defend their own beliefs and views. They don't just say, take my word for it and I can't tell you why it's true. They'll give you a decent, reasonable explanation of why that is based on a good argument or some good evidence. And a bad critical thinker will believe things that are not based on good arguments or evidence, and they don't have the ability to present these things either. So when it comes to information, bad critical thinkers of the world believe pretty much whatever they're told, especially if they think it comes from some type of trusted authority, but they don't necessarily inquire about the justification, the reasons, or the evidence. So we want to be those type of individuals that are not bad critical thinkers. We want to do better at that. And there's all kinds of reasons. It's not just that you do this to impress your professors or your bosses or your parents. I mean, of course, that's going to come along with it. But the primary benefit of it is a benefit to you. Because when you're a good critical thinker, when you're the sort of person who doesn't just believe things, but stops for a moment to ask, are you sure, and what's the evidence? If you're that sort of person, then you're not so easily manipulated, exploited, deceived, or misled. You know, we live in a very competitive world and competitive marketplace. And if you're not a good critical thinker, then you can easily be won over by false and misleading statements that don't have your own best interests at mind. How many, let's say, products or services are there out there being marketed to us daily which simply make specious or even defective arguments and fallacious claims in an effort to get us to spend our money to enrich them and buy their product or service at a loss to our own best interests? So you don't want to be the sort of person who can easily be tricked, fooled, gullible. You don't want to be the sort of person who doesn't pursue evidence and argument to determine whether or not a claim that you're hearing is actually correct and based on evidence. So it's to your own advantage. It's one of the most fundamentally important skills in life, intellectually, that you be a judicious consumer of information and that you don't just take all claims to have equal validity, that you only allow claims to have a position in your own belief system if they're somehow vetted thoroughly and that they can be confirmed by some type of reasonable argument or evidence. So I think now we've heard about the two terms and what they kind of have to do with and what the definitions are. Let's see now if you guys can add a little something from your own mind. In the chat over here, tell me, let's start with the good critical thinker definition. Based on the definition, so a kind of person who would only believe something if it was based on good evidence, but not otherwise. And the sort of person who can make good claims and arguments, defending those claims with argument or evidence. What do you think could be examples of some good critical thinkers? Now, when I ask you for examples, it could be particular people if you want to have some explanation of your example, or you could also give like categories of people like professions, offices, titles, or such like. So let's see what you can come up with. I'd love to see some of your thoughts here. What do you think is a fair, reasonable example of a good critical thinker, either a particular person or type of person, by means of profession, office, or what have you? So let's see what your suggestions may be. Okay, see right away, I see Jasmine, lawyers. Good example. I would argue that that's correct. I'm going to talk about all the examples that you guys put there. So let me start with the example of lawyer. A lawyer has to be a good critical thinker. That's definitely true. And that's probably also one of the reasons why people who go far in law and become successful in the legal field in their formal education along the way. Why do you have to be a good critical thinker to be a lawyer? Well, think about the nature of what a lawyer's job is. A lawyer can't just go into the courtroom and say, this man or woman is guilty, and I don't really know why. That's what I feel, and that's what I want you to vote when you go into the jury room. No, of course that would be a totally incompetent lawyer. They have to make a persuasive case based on evidence. They have to be able to persuade the jury or judge, whatever the case may be, of the position that the person who's been accused of the crime is guilty of the crime. Or if they are the defense attorney, then their job is to make the reasonable argument that the person is not guilty of the crime, or that the state has not proven that they are guilty. So you couldn't be an effective lawyer if you couldn't defend the case of guilt or innocence with reasonable arguments. So that's a very good example. Let's see what else is up there. Scientists and judges, okay, both are good examples. To be a scientist, right, you have to collect data, and then you have to use the data you've collected to develop hypotheses about cause and effect relationships between things in nature. And so if you were not able to defend the hypothesis that you're putting forward in the scientific community with some empirical evidence, then you would not be a scientist. A scientist can't just say, helium is the lightest element, but I have no real facts or evidence to show you that proves it. That's not what science is all about. It's not just making wild claims, from the armchair. You go out into the field, you collect observational data, and then that is used to try and justify a hypothesis about how something in nature works, or what is the cause or effect of some phenomena. So yeah, scientists are, by their nature and by the nature of their profession, good critical thinkers. I've heard judges up here, and that is similar to the case of a lawyer. The lawyer presents the facts of a case to make a persuasive argument for some legal charge, or as the case may be, innocence. The judge sometimes has to determine what the right judgment will be. In some cases, there's no jury trial, but simply the facts given to a judge who presides over the affair. And so you'd have to be a good critical thinker to be a judge. You couldn't just say, I'm going to sentence this person to 20 years, and I can't really explain why. I just kind of feel like doing so. So yeah, judges have to provide detailed legal justification for all of the decisions they make. And of course, from the responsible offices that they hold with so much on the line, we expect them to be good critical thinkers. Let's see what else is in there. I see you guys using doctors. Doctor, maybe you're thinking of the medical doctor, and that's a good example, I guess. A medical doctor, of course, has to determine facts about a person's course of treatment and diagnosis, and they have to use facts about their medical history and symptoms to come up with those conclusions. They can't just say, yeah, I think the person has cancer. It's just a hunch. I really can't say why. That's just a feeling. So again, all of the things that you guys have mentioned are fair and good examples of people who have to deal with argument and evidence when they provide claims to people. They're also the kind of people who don't just take a claim at face value, but make sure that it's true by seeing what evidence or argument can be given to back it up. Nurses, yes, anyone in the medical profession who has to make diagnostic choices and prescription for people would probably have to have some measure of good critical thinking. Otherwise, they couldn't judge the facts in accordance with the diagnosis or course of treatment. Economists, yes, there are different schools of economics. There's the Friedman School. There's the Keynesian School of Economics. Detailed economic arguments are given to justify the economic theory of the particular economist, even though they do have differences of opinion. Some are more free market and some are more willing to grant that government regulation can be necessary at certain points in time. But of course, they're relying on conceptual arguments that are sometimes also grounded in empirical data. News reporters, yes. So journalists, when they publish an article in the press, they have to have that article vetted, and it has to be cleared by the editorial board of the newspaper. So they can't just make wild and baseless claims. Otherwise, of course, they would lose their credibility and they would lose their position in a journalistic organization or enterprise. So not to say that people have never written sensationalist journalism or that tabloid journalism does not exist. Of course it does. And in some of these different examples, we can distinguish between better and worse. Some politicians perhaps are good critical thinkers and maybe some are less. I see the example here given of Joe Rogan. Aaron, I don't really listen to him. I've heard a lot of people say that he's got some insights, but I don't know what he's actually an expert in, but he's definitely an opinionated person, and whenever I've heard him speak, he tries to at least give a defense of his views. Sometimes, I don't know, you could make the argument that he professes on topics where he lacks specific expertise, but I think a lot of his guests that he does have interviews with bring a lot of expertise of their own. Okay, so detectives, yeah, if you are going to be a person out there, a forensic investigator, crime scene investigator, ballistics specialist, you are going to have to try and, I don't know, determine the facts of a crime that's been committed based on the physical evidence that's been left behind. So you can't just say, I think Jones is guilty, but I can't really give any reasons. You'd have to give like, oh, here's a fingerprint on the murder weapon, or here is some blood spatter, which indicates the trajectory of the weapon from a certain location where he was known to have been, etc. Okay, and we go on and on. I see all these are great examples. Risk analyst, engineers, yes. Family member, a close family member of mine, my uncle, was a long-time aerospace engineer. You have to have very detailed explanation for any proposed project, both in terms of how likely it is to achieve the goal of the company that you're contracting a project for, and also to make sure that it's within the budgetary framework that's been given. Psychologists, another good example, all people within the medical field, whether it's clinicians or psychologists, therapists, have to listen carefully to their patients' description of symptoms or psychological experiences, and then prescribe a course of care, or at least consult with them in a way that's going to be productive towards their full development. So we've got a lot of good examples. Now we're just having a nice open discussion. I wanted you guys to give me a little bit on the other side. What do you think could be some examples that fit this description of the bad critical thinker? So again, you could give me an example of a specific people or of profession, office, category of people in society, as long as it's something that we could you just discuss for a little while and you think it's a good example. Let's put it up. Okay, Alec, I like that you're saying flat earthers. I see the president mentioned there, bloggers, okay, a lot of stuff. I'm gonna go into all those examples as they keep showing in. Anti-masker, conspiracy theorists, people who read gossip magazines. All right, let's go into some of these cases. So the flat earther, a flat earth person is, I would for sure agree, not being a good critical thinker with respect to the one thing that defines their position on the shape of this planet. I mean, how much evidence is there that the Earth is a sphere? It's overwhelming. I mean, there's common sense reasons. There's photographic and video evidence. When you look up in the night sky, you see every other celestial object in space is a sphere, because matter in the void of space, under the forces of gravity, accretes into a sphere. Obviously, the Earth is not a disk that's flat, because if it was, how could you account for the fact that some parts of it are bathed in sunlight while other parts of it at the same time are covered in darkness? If this is a flat disk, wouldn't the entire surface be shining in the same sunlight at the same time? And why would satellites orbit the planet's surface, as we know they do, if it was a disk? Wouldn't things fall off the edge? Anyway, I don't know. I'm going a little too far, indulging in my frustration with the existence of some people that believe the Earth is flat. And there's not too many, and I hope none of you really think that. But anyway, yeah, some people hold on and latch onto sensational claims. Flat Earther would be one. There are a lot of conspiracy theorists, I guess, could fit the same description, not taking good arguments to lead them to their conclusions, but just any available argument, even if it's in violation of the principle of parsimony, of Occam's razor, the most complex explanation possible to explain a set of facts. That's usually not the one that's likeliest to be true, and I think a good critical thinker would recognize that. At the same time, is it impossible for there to ever have been conspiracies in the whole history of the world? No, I'm sure there have been, but to think that it's the rule rather than the exception is a bit too much. People that read gossip magazines, yeah, so people who consumers of tabloid journalism perhaps are not good critical thinkers. That would be instead of things that can be verified through actual interviews and inquiry with the person at hand. Like if you see two celebrities walking down the street and some paparazzi took a photo, now it's appearing on the cover of a tabloid magazine and it says, oh, are they dating? And you just believe they are just based on the mere suggestion given in the photograph. Maybe you're not waiting for better evidence before you come to draw your conclusions. So some people like to reach conclusions just because they sound alluring, titillating, whatever, not because they're justified based on the best evidence and argument. Christian, you say influencers. I mean, it does depend, I suppose. There's a lot of people, I guess, who pose as a social media influencer on internet, whether it's, whatever platform you might be thinking of, TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, like what we're using here. But I guess it depends on the content of what they say. Some people out there may be influencers, but they also are wise and rational when they actually discuss their views. But fair enough. You probably have a little more familiarity with some of these influencers than me. The ones that I've seen, in many cases, they just want to kind of look cool, but they don't actually offer an intellectual foundation for a lot of things they believe. So it could be a fair example. Yeah, so children, okay, fair point. Little children, when they're young, in a way can't be blamed for their lack of critical analysis because they're at such a stage of development that they've not yet developed their own full maturity and reason. So they can't judge a lot of questions yet until they become a bit older. Therefore, children typically just believe whatever they are told by trusted figures, parents, teachers, and authorities. But we also hope that those children mature and grow up into the wise, rational, critical thinking adults that we're all trying to be and that we're all continually trying to move closer towards. So children maybe are not always the best critical thinkers, although there's always going to be exceptions to some of these examples. Like some precocious children out there do exist who are actually quite wise and impressive, but for the most part, you're right. Okay, so lots of examples here. The case of the Karens, you're talking about a typically white woman acting in a way that's angry or entitled, and then caught on video in many cases and displayed for the world to the internet. Yeah, I mean, people who don't, let's say, maybe question the appropriateness of their behavior in a social setting, especially in the socio-political context that we find ourselves in, could be considered not to have thought carefully about what they're doing and why. I mean, probably that's true. Let's see, people that think that COVID's a hoax. Yeah, some of that is like really specific to a particular claim, like the flat earther. But I say it's hard to argue anybody's, if anybody thinks that COVID's a hoax, it's really hard to understand where they're coming from. We know there's a lot of dead people. We know that the entire planet is enforcing policies to try and deal with it. So why would we all punish ourselves and constrain ourselves with some false kind of pretense? That would not suit the interests of anybody. So I can't understand what people would think the motive would be to do that. Now you say journalists, they're dingo. There is some sensationalist bias in journalism in some cases, but you, I think, can't paint with too broad a brush. You have to make distinctions. We can't say that journalism in and of itself is a source of poor argument and bad critical thinking, because it's actually a very important tradition and principle of a democracy to have a robust free press. You know, that's right there in the Constitution, the very First Amendment. If we didn't have the ability to have investigative journalism exposing corporate or government scandals to the people, then the leaders would not be so accountable. And so even though sometimes there can be a rush to be the first to report something, or there can be failure to fully source or whatever an article based on its content, we should still hold out, I think, for the ideal of good and enterprising journalism. It does exist, but yes, we should always be alert to the possibility of bad journalism. Kyle Rittenhouse, the shooter over in Kenosha. Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, yeah, this person went, like he had his mom literally drive him across state lines to go over there and he thought defend property or something with a big long rifle. Well, he's going to be facing justice now, and so certainly his conduct hasn't been good for him or for anybody else. I think people can't try and become the judge, jury, and executioner. Otherwise, we are going to have a breakdown of civilization. I don't think you want to be out there on your lawn protecting your property with a gun, but you know, that's the kind of world that we descend into if people start taking it upon themselves instead of the police to enforce law and order. All right, well, and people who only use social media as their research. Good example also, Sarah. So great examples all around. Social media is a great utility and a great platform for us to share information and to stay in touch. But to get all of your news exclusively off of your social media feeds is probably a source of poor critical thinking, because sometimes people link to articles that are not coming from verified sources, that are outside the realm of proper journalistic procedures and vetting. So, you know, people, in a lot of cases, their wall is just an editorialized reflection of their own political worldview. So the biases that they bring to their individual lives are reflected in the kind of content that they post. So if you only get news and information from your like-minded friends posting on whatever platform, then you might end up with a biased view of the news stories of the day. Advertising and marketing, sure. A lot of times advertisers and marketers try and push products on us using defective or fallacious arguments. And we will get into that later in the class too, as we talk about how to be a good critical thinker when it comes to making choices, consumer choices. Okay, so good start. We've talked about a good and a bad critical thinker, but there's more for us to say. So I'm going to erase this point, and then we're going to talk about the whole idea of argument itself. That's very important, and we will spend some time on that. So what then is an argument? Okay, so as you guys see there, a good critical thinker is good at evaluating arguments to see whether they're high quality or not, and they're also good at presenting good arguments to back their claims up. Bad critical thinkers lack in both of those ways. They're not so good at judging the quality of an argument, so they believe things whether they're based on any good reasons or not, and also they don't have the ability to defend their own perspectives and point of view with an argument. That means that arguments are key to this entire topic. Good critical thinkers deal well with them and make them in a good way, and bad critical thinkers just the opposite. So that pushes us to the next question then. What exactly do we mean then by the term argument that we keep using? What exactly in the logical sense is an argument? Now before I write the definition up here, let me just set the stage for a moment. When you hear the word argument, a lot of you guys, it's totally reasonable to think this, but you might come to that word with a negative connotation. You might be thinking, oh, arguments, why are we talking about make arguments? Arguments are bad. Arguments are when people get mad at each other and they insult each other, yell at each other, call each other names. You might be thinking, when people get into an argument, they're having a fight. we should be peaceful, we should be nice, we shouldn't get into arguments. My parents, they used to argue and get into arguments and now they're divorced, or whatever the case is, right? So you might have that negative viewpoint on the word and concept argument. But I need to debunk that idea, actually, because the term argument, when it's used in the logical sense, as it's understood by logicians and in critical thinking classes like this, in its academic and formal sense, the term argument is just an attempt to defend a claim with reasons, okay? And so let me make that really formally precise by writing down a definition here that we want to all be clear about. So what's an argument? Argument is just, it's a very bare bones technical definition of it, but it's just a set of two or more sentences where one of the sentences is the conclusion of the argument and all the other statements are premises of the argument. Okay, so I'm going to explain, but let me write that down. It is a set of two or more sentences where one sentence is the conclusion and all the other sentences are premises. Okay, so there we have our definition of an argument. Let me write down an example. So, well, first let me leave the definition up there and just discuss it for a minute. So whenever there's an argument, there's some claim that you're trying to prove or to show that it's true. That's the conclusion of the argument. When you have a logical argument, it's not just the conclusion, it's backed up by some number of premises. So each premise of the argument is a sentence that gives support to the conclusion. Okay? So I'm going to erase what we have here. Let me make sure that it's in our chat so that if anybody didn't get a chance to write it down, they will still see it in the chat bar. So I'm typing this in real quick. Okay, and seeing here your guys' comments. People are scrambling to turn them into a okay, we're talking, that was Kyle Rittenhouse. Definition is different than what the connotation is now. That's true, right? So like the formal definition of argument doesn't necessarily imply anything about people getting at odds, being upset with each other, being mad at each other. There is an informal meaning of the term. Like, so when you look up definitions in any dictionary, you're always going to see like primary, secondary, tertiary definitions and stuff. There is a colloquial, like everyday usage of the word that implies, yeah, we're fighting. But in the formal sense that logicians deploy, in the academic context, like school, we think of arguments rather as just any attempt to defend a claim with reasons. The claim you're trying to defend is this conclusion of the argument. And the reasons given to back it up, to support it, to prove it, right? Those are called premises. And so others have written about that. Fighting for what you believe or know is correct. Again, though, not really. It's not necessarily about fighting. It's just trying to state deep reasons. If others agree with it, they will agree with it. If they don't, they don't. But making the argument is just to try and provide the reasons for your conclusion. Maybe it will persuade another person. But using the word fight, again, brings us into this kind of like tense clash or whatever, that kind of connotation. People sometimes just use arguments, they recite them to themselves to better clarify their own viewpoints. So sometimes you're not even addressing another person. I can sit down and like read a book. Like I can read, you know, the book of Friedman, on Friedman, like free market economics, or I could read a book on Karl Marx, like socialist theory of economics. And I can like understand the arguments of both. And I'm by myself, like sitting in a room. So thinking about arguments, hearing arguments, considering arguments does not always mean necessarily that we're like activists trying to assert these arguments to others. Many times we do, but in some cases we're just trying to come to our conclusions. Okay, so making a point for your perspective. Would a thesis statement be considered an argument? Well, the presentation of the reasons for the thesis statement would be the argument of the paper, right? So say you wrote a paper in some class and your thesis was, I don't know, single parent families tend to produce children that do that pursue humanities majors more than science majors. I don't know, like I'm just making up a weird hypothesis. I have no belief in that. It's just arbitrarily selected. But suppose that you had studied this topic and you looked at the data and you were ready to sort of say, well, I can make the case for this based on the data that exists. Then your overall paper would be trying to reach the conclusion stated in the thesis, and the body paragraphs are like the premises that provide an evidence for that conclusion. Okay, so let me write down some example of an argument, or maybe a couple, and then you'll get a feel for how they look on the page and in the written form. Now, I'm going to write this argument out, and this argument's written in what is called standard form. So here, let me tell you about standard form, and then I'm going to fill in the blanks up here. So in logic, we kind of insist that when you write arguments out, that you do so in a precise format. That's what standard form is all about. So the standard format of an argument is the conclusion of the argument is placed at the bottom of the list of the premises and conclusion. So the conclusion of the argument is at the bottom. And the premises are listed above it. Okay, so let me write out this argument and you'll see how it obeys this basic standard form. First premise, so I'm numbering the two premises 1 and 2. First premise, all men were born on Earth. Okay, now I'm just going to get you to help me just a slight bit, just to get your input. Someone tell me the name of one real-life human being, like a man that we all know of, a real person. Just a well-understood name of a person out there. Anybody. There's billions of us, so, but it's got to be someone we all know. It just can't be like your friend that the other classmates haven't heard of. Dr. Vulish, me? Sure. I mean, I guess. Bill Gates, though. Maybe make it a little less personal, right? Bill Gates, let's say that. Elon Musk, that's also fine. But I think I'll go with Bill Gates. Albert Einstein is also kind of good. A lot of people. Keanu Reeves, Obama. Let's try Bill Gates, okay? So Bill Gates is a man. That's true. Okay, now here's two premises. Now, you see this here horizontal line? That's also a part of standard form. The horizontal line is there because it separates the premises from the conclusion. So the conclusion is going to go right here below this horizontal line. Okay? I'm going to erase the note about standard form so we can focus on the argument for a minute. So what do you deduce? Huh? I think you can derive a conclusion from this. So you've got all men were born on Earth. Okay, second premise, Bill Gates is a man. So therefore, what do you conclude? It's just that Bill Gates was born on Earth. Exactly, Jasmine, correct. Therefore, Bill Gates was born on Earth. Okay, so what we see here is this bottom statement, the bottom line, the thing that the last sentence here, this is the conclusion of the argument. And these two statements here, these are the premises of the argument. Okay? Now, every argument is a combination of one conclusion and at least one premise. This argument has two premises, but it could have 1, 2, 3, or any number. It just cannot have 0. Okay? So you're actually not dealing with an argument if someone just says one statement, like one claim. Even if the claim is true, it's not an argument unless it's backed by at least one premise. Okay? Now, in this argument, the conclusion that we are led to is that Bill Gates was born on Earth. But the person doesn't just say, Bill Gates was born on Earth. They give an argument. They say, well, here are the reasons that I'm giving this conclusion, because basically all men were born on Earth. Furthermore, Bill Gates is a man, and so therefore Bill Gates was born on Earth. Now, this is not an important argument. Like, I'm not writing this up here because it's something that people really debate. In real life, the arguments that we derive conclusions for are oftentimes much more interesting. Someone can say, you know, wearing a mask is an effective way to lower transmission rates of COVID-19. That could be their conclusion. You ask the person, well, why do you believe that? What's the reason? What's your argument? And then if they gave an argument, they wouldn't just shrug their shoulders and be like, I don't know, that's just what I've heard. They would say, oh, you know, here are the reasons. Because it transmits through respiratory airborne droplets, the masks mitigate the spread of the droplets that propagate through the air when you breathe, so it reduces the likelihood of transmission. Like, therefore, it's an effective tool. That would be an argument. But just one sentence sitting there by itself, even if it's true, be an argument unless it's backed by one premise. Okay? Now, a little more on the standard form. I don't want that to get lost on you guys. This is written in standard form. Why? Because the conclusion's below and the premises are listed above. Now, the horizontal line, like I say, is the divider between the conclusion and the premises. It almost resembles something visually that you guys are probably familiar with from your old days of elementary school doing elementary mathematical tables, right? Like, so if you had this, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Remember doing those kind of little math problems? In this case, the horizontal line shows you that this is the result at bottom of the operations listed above the line. So in almost like a quantitative reasoning type way, we say this is the product. This is the logical consequence that follows from the statements that are here above, okay? Another thing, when you have premises, when there's more than one premise like we have here, they are not supposed to occur on the same continuous horizontal line. That's why I've separated them and numbered them 1 and 2. So whenever one premise ends and like the sentence is over and we say period, if there's another premise, we're not just going to continue writing along the same line like as if we're writing a book. It's the equivalent of hitting the return key, jumping down to the next ledger line, and then entering the next premise. So if there were 3 premises in this argument, where would the third one go? It would not go, you know, on the same ledger to the right of number 2. It would go below number 2 and above this horizontal line, okay? So just know that, because when you guys turn in homework and do quizzes and stuff later that ask you to provide the argument in standard form, you just have to adhere to that, so that I'm trying to get you in the habit of doing it right off the bat. So arguments, when we read them in like a newspaper or on the internet or something, you know, we just see it in the block paragraph format of everyday writing. But when you try and think critically about what actually the argument is, and you formally diagram it like a logician, then you identify the individual premises and put them in a list above the conclusion like that, okay? So let's just see if you guys have tracked some of this. I'm going to ask some basic questions here. Suppose that somebody says, America is the best country on the planet. Is that an argument? That's a yes or no for you, so just let me know. Is that an argument? This statement, America is the best country in the world. Is this an argument? Okay, good. So you guys are saying no. That is the correct answer. But why is it not an argument? Why isn't it an argument? What's wrong with that being an argument? Why doesn't it count as an argument, technically? Why not? Because it's just a statement. Well, Jasmine, it's not because it can't be proven. I mean, whether something's an argument or not does not depend on whether or not it can be proven beyond all possibility of doubt. It only has to have reasons attached to it. So the real reason that's not an argument is simply because it doesn't have any premises. It's not because it's an opinion either. The conclusion of an argument can be an opinion. The conclusion of an argument can be like, vanilla is the best ice cream. I could give you an argument like that. Okay, vanilla is the most neutral flavor, therefore it goes the best with toppings, therefore vanilla is the best ice cream flavor. What I did there is I just gave an argument for my view that vanilla is the best ice cream. So just because the conclusion is an opinion does not invalidate it from being an argument. It's no longer an argument, though, if there's no premises at all. Now, how could we turn that statement into an argument? Well, you could make an argument for that, and of course people do make the argument all the time that America is the best country. So you could say, for example, what would be some premises? You could say, well, we have the most wealth, and we have the most long-standing constitutional democracy, and we have the most powerful military. So therefore, we're the best nation in the world. You know, I'm just supposing some reasons, premises that might be adduced in the effort to support that conclusion. So when there's a claim and it's just sitting there by itself and there's no effort to defend it with any reasons, whether it's true or not, you've not yet made an argument. Making an argument is making the case. So if a lawyer shows up and says, this guy's guilty, done. I'm not going to say anything else. He did not make an argument for the person being guilty. Maybe he is guilty. Maybe that's a true statement that he's guilty. But we're waiting for the premises and the evidence before we can judge the quality of the case being made for guilt. You see what I'm saying? So I just used that example because I know that it's an election season and we hear a lot of people talking about, you know, our country, how it should be, how it is, what we like about it, what we don't like about it. But anyway, when we make such claims, we would hope that they're based on arguments. It's fair to argue that this is the greatest country. It's fair to argue, some might argue that, you know, we have problems that we need to correct about whatever the issue is. But all we can ask of our friends, colleagues, peers, and members of our community is that some reasons are given to defend the claims that are made, and then we can evaluate the quality of the argument. Okay? So that's just one example. Let me erase this and go a little further in our notes. Right, so what I wrote up there, like Bill Gates was born on Earth because all men were born on Earth and he is a man, that is sort of just an example that I use to illustrate the logical concept of an argument. But as I'm trying to like open up and expand on now, in real life, the subject matter of the arguments that we make with each other is much more detailed and oftentimes more relevant to our everyday life. You know, like say you're talking to your parents and they disagree with you on some issue of policy. You say to them, I think that you know, everyone should have to wear a mask when they're out in public, and you have a parent or some, I don't know, friend or someone that says, I don't agree with you. Now you guys might hash it out and you might try and provide to them your reasons. And if they have any reasons to give, then they might give theirs, and you guys have now exchanged ideas. In real life, therefore, the actual substance of the arguments is much more important and relevant to our everyday lives. Say that you are one of the investigators or maybe an attorney and you're involved in a trial where the case is murder. Maybe these premises could be used to defend the claim that Jones is the culprit. Jones' fingerprints were on the weapon. Jones had a motive to kill Smith. So therefore, Jones is the killer. Now, obviously, this is just a hypothetical. I'm using invented character names, Jones and Smith. But suppose that there was a case in which a man named Jones has been accused of the crime of murder, and this argument is presented in court. The evidence is, number one, Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon. Okay. Jones had a motivation to kill Smith. Maybe Smith owed him money, or you know, he was upset at him for some vendetta. So therefore, the conclusion is drawn: Jones is the killer. Now, when you are out there in the world it doesn't. It's nothing that I can say what arguments you'll actually be involved in. You might be in arguments involving religious matters, political matters, the personal details of your everyday lives, and so forth. But the basic concept of an argument remains the same across all these examples. We've got a conclusion, and we're just trying to lead someone to believe the conclusion by presenting reasons that support it. Okay? Now, I also want to tell you guys quickly about some words that are given to indicate that you're looking at a conclusion or a premise of a logical argument. So these are called premise or conclusion indicator words. Let's start with the conclusion indicator words, okay? Conclusion indicator words. All right, so what I'm asking you to think of right now are some words that are in your own vocabulary. They're already there. You just were never taught before that these are words that are indicative of the conclusion of a logical argument. But now that we're learning this material, I think that it's going to just jump up at you that you actually do have some established conclusion indicator words in your own lexicon. So what would be a word that a person would say perhaps right before they say Jones is the killer after stating the two premises of the argument? So like, I'll rehearse it with you. Jones's fingerprints are on the weapon, and Jones had a motive to kill Smith, so okay, good. Here you're using therefore. That is definitely one of the most well-known conclusion indicator words, and that is probably the most popular one that people use. So therefore is one of them, but it's not the only one. There are some others, so let's see what else you have. Yes, there's also thus and hence. Those are synonymous with therefore. So those are also conclusion indicator words. I see also it follows, and that's very good. That's another one. That does work. It follows that. Let's see what else is there. Henceforth, actually, Sebastian, only hence. Henceforth is slightly different in meaning. Henceforth means after this in time, not logically. So if I say, henceforth I shall never shave again, that means like after today I'll never have that razor touch my face again. But it doesn't express the same content as this is what is implied by some facts that I've previously stated. So hence is definitely one of them, but not henceforth. So, yes, so is one of the most everyday and easy to use. Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon. Jones had a motive to kill Smith. So Jones is the killer. All right? Consequently, that's also one. Yes, good. Consequently, somebody knows their Latin. Kyle, ergo. Very good. That's a fancy-sounding one from antiquity. Most often used in an academic context, but it could be used in an everyday context also. Entails that would also be fair, Bianca, yes. Now, celestial and let's see, and Tyler, those words given and because of this, those are not actually conclusion indicator words. They have to do with what are premise indicator words. So we're actually going to go into that next. But when you say because of this, you're actually saying, signifying that that is a reason for a conclusion. So for example, because Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon, and because Jones had a motive to kill Smith, thus it follows that Jones is the killer, right? So you would not say because when you get to the conclusion, because the conclusion is not one of the reasons, which is what the word because indicates. It's the thing that is coming from the reasons, that is following from the reasons, that's implied by those reasons. Okay, all in all, I understand that it sounds like a summary statement, like, well, so all in all, Jones is the killer, but it's a little too informal because sometimes a person says all in all when they're simply trying to summarize what they said before rather than tell you a further conclusion that derives from it. You know, so like, for example, I could say to you, I'm sad, I haven't eaten today, all in all, I've just had a bad day. It's not necessarily that that conclusion follows from the other things. It's just kind of a summary of the other. It's a subtle distinction, but I don't want us to lose the distinction. So we'll not go with all in all, I guess. Furthermore is also not one to use because furthermore just means here's another piece of information. That could actually be used in stating the premises. Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon. Furthermore, Jones had a motive to kill Smith. Therefore, Jones is the killer. These conclusion indicator words are telling you that we're done now. Not that we're going to keep adding reasons and reasons and reasons. It's so to conclude, right? Okay, good. So I like that discussion. Just know that these are conclusion indicator words. Now, bringing this back to real life. In your life, when you hear people say some of these words, or when you're reading something online or whatever, and you see that word written down, what you know is that what's coming right after that word is somebody's conclusion of an argument, even if they're talking informally. You know, if somebody says to you, my internet was out, so I couldn't attend the lecture. Very, very quickly stated, it's a logical argument. Because the internet was out, therefore I couldn't attend the lecture. You know? So just be alert to the use of these words in speech and in writing, because it's an indicator, it's a giveaway that someone's trying to state an argument. Okay, now let's talk about some premise indicator words while we're on the topic. Some of them, we've already had some spoilers because they came out in our discussion of the conclusion indicator words. But having done that, I bet you it'll make it easy enough for you to think of some easy enough examples of it. Okay, so now we're going to go over some premise indicator words. So now, think about it. What are words that might be uttered or written before a person provides some of those premises in like this argument or in others? One is because. That's very good. Yes. Because is a classic premise indicator word. It has the meaning, this is a cause of something that's coming later. Since is another one, exactly. And so let's hear how that would sound in speech. Since Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon, and because Jones had a motive to kill Smith, therefore Jones is the killer. Or, right? So since is one of them. Due to, like, yeah, due to the fact that, or given that. Due to the fact that Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon, and given that Jones had a motive to kill Smith, it follows that Jones is the killer. I see the use of as, and even if it's less common, that is actually one that's available. As Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon, and seeing as Jones had a motive to kill Smith, yeah, so as and so on, those are fair enough. However, interesting, I would like to maybe not include however, just because the force of the term however is often used to imply a contrast in our reasons. You know, like if I say to you, I had a lot of sleep, however, I'm still tired. What I'm telling you is two things. I had a lot of sleep and I am tired, but the expression however is to indicate that this is an unlikely second statement given the first one. A lot of sleep usually means I would not be tired. So in the statement of premises in the general case, it is only in some certain situations where we want to imply that the reasons contrast with each other. Like in this case, it would sound a little weird. Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon. However, Jones had a motive to kill Smith, so Jones is the killer. So I think it'll, in a way, just it's not entirely off base, but I think that little implication of some contrast would confuse a few of us. So we won't include that one. Assuming that is another fair one, yeah. It's kind of like given that. Assuming that Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon, and given that he had a motive to kill Smith, it follows that, hence, he's the killer. Okay? So, I think, in old Victorian, like, 19th century prose, I sometimes see people using for. Since Jones' fingerprints are on the weapon, and for Jones had a motive to kill Smith, but I'm not going to put for up there because it's so far removed from the fashions of everyday speech nowadays. To add on really maybe more indicates that something is going to be added to my statement, but not necessarily that it serves as evidence for the conclusion that comes later. But it's in a gray area. So these are clear cases of those premise indicator words. So anyway then, guys, just as I said with the conclusion indicator words, when you ever hear or see those words, you now have been told that now reasons are being affirmed towards some conclusion in a logical argument. All right. Now, we have a little time left, and we'll pick up and resume with these topics on Tuesday when we come back. Remember that I'm holding most of the lectures, as I said earlier, on YouTube Live. And whenever we go back and forth to Zoom, I'll let you know through notifications that I'll send to the class. But Tuesday, it's going to be the same as this. We're going to be back on YouTube Live at 4. I'll broadcast this lecture to you, and then it's going to be archived and uploaded to the channel for you to watch later if you ever want. So I want to next go over something important term. And this is the term truth. This is really big, and it's a major concept in this class and in our everyday lives. So we said that the whole point behind making these arguments, like why would we ever construct an argument? Why would we ever state an argument? The whole point behind doing it is to try and show or prove that the conclusion is what? Like we do all of this argumentation to try and convince others or maybe even just ourselves that the conclusion of the argument is what? We're trying to demonstrate or show what about the conclusion? That it's true. Exactly, Marianne. We're trying to show that it's true. But now we have to ask a deep question. What does it mean for a statement or a sentence to be true? If the whole point is to show that some sentence is true, well then, what is truth? And I find that this is an interesting question to pose to a group of incoming students to a class like this, because it came right to your mind when I asked you, when a professor asks you for the first time, what's the word truth really mean? You'll realize that it's actually kind of a slippery concept, and it's a bit difficult to state its definition, because the definition that you're thinking of is probably circular. Like in your mind, you're like, true, like it's true is what it means. But you can't define a term in terms of itself. So without using the word true or a synonym for truth, what would you say that you think the word truth means? Now you say here, some would argue that there's no such thing as objective truth. Well, I mean, that's a little bit extreme, don't you think? Like, for example, I'm wearing these glasses. Isn't that true? I would say that's objectively true. Like, we're not dreaming, right? So, good. I like what you say, Eden, reality. Ryan, you say ample evidence. Let me push back on that just a little and explain why. It's not that that you're off base, because that's actually the most common answer I see a student give at first, and that's why I have a ready response to that. Same with you, Jasmine, when you say something that can be proven. You and Ryan have both pointed out something having to do with evidence or proof. Now, that's not quite correct, because the fact that something is true is in often cases true whether or not anyone has evidence to prove it. Okay? Like, for example, it's a weird example, but think about this. Say that like somebody murdered a person, and they disposed of their body in some weird place that no one's ever going to find. And they did it so thoroughly that the person's body was never found, and no one even knew what happened to them. Did they go missing? Did they commit suicide? Did they get murdered? No one knows. They just disappeared one day without a trace. Now, suppose that the killer buried this body somewhere that never ever gets found. Is it true that they were murdered? Yes, it's true. But does anybody have any evidence? No. Let's suppose there's no evidence. The person destroyed all the evidence. Suppose that the murderer killed himself later, and now that person doesn't even exist. So there's not even one human being in the world anymore that knows what happened and that has any proof or evidence of what happened. But doesn't it still, in the hypothetical I'm giving you, it's still true, isn't it, that the person has been killed? Now, of course, stuff like this has happened, so it's not entirely like you have to think of it as like some made-up example. So the fact that it's true doesn't only become true when someone finds out. It was already true, it's just that nobody really knew it was true. In a similar sense, right now, I don't know, there could be aliens far away in the universe on another planet. I don't know that, but if it's true, it's not going to become true once I figure it out. It's already true now, if that's the case. So why do we need evidence? We need evidence to give ourselves reasons to believe that things are true. That's why we have to have justification. That's why we have to base our beliefs on evidence, because it's the most reliable way of getting to the truth. But the fact that something's true or not can be totally independent of the case of whether there's been any proof yet. Okay, so now looking back at your comments, I think the right way to say it is some of the things that you guys are saying, which is that it's something real. It's something that is a fact. So let me give you a formal definition here. and now you can connect it to this discussion. Truth. Truth is when what a sentence says matches the facts of reality. Okay, so the sentence says something, and it's true if it matches the facts of reality. Okay, so if I tell you right now, I'm wearing glasses, am I speaking the truth? Yes, that's a true statement, because it's not just that I'm saying it, but here's the fact. It's like I am wearing those glasses. So I say something, and that statement matches the real world. If I tell you that I'm wearing a hat right now, that's not true. I can say that, it's a sentence, but what that sentence says is out of line with what's real and what's really happening. So when you have a true statement, it aligns with reality. And when you have a false statement, it doesn't. So if I tell you I own cats, that's a fact. If I tell you I have a camel or something, that's just not true. Now, sometimes we come to believe things that are not true because we've been deceived. Sometimes people tell you things that they know aren't true in order to mislead or manipulate your point of view. The more often common case is that people pass along false information because they themselves have been misinformed. So they unintentionally pass along a falsehood to you, which you then come to believe, not because they intended to deceive you, but because they themselves are not aware of the facts. Now, we're critical thinkers, or we're going to try to be better at it anyway, and that means that we want, to the best of our ability, to only believe what kind of things you think, true things. Because if you have false beliefs, by definition of the term truth, that means that you're thinking the world is a certain way, but it's not really that way. So if you have a head full of false beliefs, then you're out of touch with reality, in a way disconnected from it. And you want to be in touch with reality. Even if sometimes reality is not to your liking, you want to be able to have an honest appreciation of facts, because that's the only way that you can act appropriately in light of those facts. So being a good critical thinker doesn't mean that you're perfect and that you get all your beliefs 100% correct and true, but that you are a little better at screening off falsehood from truth, and that you don't let as much falsehood into your belief system as you otherwise might. Being a good critical thinker then helps to protect you against the establishment of a lot of false beliefs, which in the end are bound to be to your disadvantage and to your, to your detriment. So we perform the act of constructing arguments and evaluating them to try and distinguish between true and false claims. Sad that we can't meet in person, yes, but we're just going to do the best we can. Maybe some of you will look back when classes are fully restored and will even think that there had been some interesting, unique elements of your education that other people didn't get to have. I don't know. Just trying to look on the bright side. Is that true? I don't know. So we're going to cut for now because we're running low on time, obviously. When we pick up next time, I'm going to just finish this discussion of some introductory concepts of logic. I want to next discuss what is belief. Then I want to tell you what are different types of sentences. And then we're going to get into what is the difference between deductive argument and inductive argument. Okay, so we've had a good first lecture meeting. I really appreciate you guys being here and making it a good chat. Let's be back. Have a good weekend then. Make sure to keep following my announcements through Titanium or Canvas, as the case may be. And I will see you guys back on Tuesday. Email me or anything else if you have any questions or anything you need. And thanks again, okay? Take care, and I'll see you guys after the weekend.